Hey everybody, it's Max J. Miller, co-author with Robert Hollis of the upcoming How Is That Working? And I wanted to share with you a little bit from a book that I've just been reading recently. It's called Mindsight. It's by a guy named Daniel Siegel, MD. He's I believe he's a professor and also a practicing psychiatrist at UCLA in California. But he wrote this book, and it's based on all this new, really fascinating neurology research that's being done. You know, in the last 5 years, we've learned a tremendous amount about the human brain, about you know, the human beings as a result of being able to look into a living brain and see how it's responding in various and how it's operating under various circumstances and so forth. It's by virtue of a machine called a functional MRI. You know, MRI is that magnetic resonance imaging, but functional means that you can actually be doing something and like reading or watching a movie or whatever, and the fMRI can actually see which parts of your brain are active, are most active during that time. And what this has done has just moved our understanding of the human brain forward just a quantum leap. And why this is so fascinating to me is, as I've been reading a lot. I've got a whole bookshelf of brain research things. I find this such a fascinating area because when I talk about the transformation that our hero experiences in the other world, very often a big part of that has to do with becoming aware of oneself, becoming more aware of one's own kind of emotional makeup and reactions and so forth. And what Daniel Siegel is telling us in Mindsight is a lot of the research is validating what a lot of wisdom traditions have been teaching us all along, which is that there is within all of us the ability to actually reshape our brain. And that's what he's saying. We can literally rewire our brains. And that some people are able, I mean, and you can do this all throughout life. You know how we have this idea in our culture, this belief that, you know, personality is fixed at age 5 and that's it. But what he's actually saying is, no, there's a tremendous amount, capacity in the brain for and it's called neuroplasticity, for the brain to essentially rewire itself. Lots of examples of people who had brain damage, and the brain actually moves the activity to a neighboring part of the brain, and it takes over a neighboring part of the brain to provide the function that one other part of the brain had originally provided. I laughingly thought, well, you know, this explains it to me, because as I've been so focused on writing for the last 10 years, and you know, I spend so much time in dictionaries and thesaurus and looking at words and so forth. It really is fascinating that my vocabulary has expanded as it has, but at the same time, I don't seem to be able to remember names at all. And so I was reading, not in this book, but in another book, that those functions are adjacent functions. And I'm thinking, wonder if my brain has been stealing from that name recognition, name and face recognition part. But anyway, I digress. The thing I wanted to share with you about this is that, you know, what the research is saying is, one, that this basic idea, what he's referring to as mindsight, is our ability to actually observe our own mental activity. You know, you can actually notice your emotional state changing. You can notice the thought process and how it moves and it affects your body and so forth. And he's saying mindsight is really the ability to, he says, the brain's capacity for insight and empathy, being able to observe our own processes and get insight into them, but also be able to observe the processes of others, to have empathy with what they're feeling and going through and what they may be thinking at any moment, and how they may be reacting to a situation. So he said it's really the key to nurturing healthy minds and hearts, is this idea of this basic mind sight. And when I talk about initiation and the tribal leaders taking the young people out of the culture and going out for a year and taking them from being children and bringing them back as adults, and that's really what the hero's journey process is about on some level. Really, a big part of that is this kind of understanding your place in the world and really understanding who you are and your strengths and so forth. And it's interesting to note that the struggle that many marketers go through, business people and marketers, is in defining and articulating very clearly who they are, what their unique story is, what they have to offer. See, people are driven forward sometimes intuitively, and it really takes something to actually reflect and start to examine and say, okay, now, why am I being driven in this direction? Why do I feel compelled to, share this or to provide this service or whatever? And the process of being able to look and examine and articulate that story is a process of self-discovery. So, and that's kind of my forte. This book is saying, as a new approach to well-being, he's got three basic guiding principles. One is that mind sight can be cultivated. That this ability is not just a natural. Some are gifted and some aren't, but it actually can be cultivated through very practical steps. And it means that creating well-being in our mental life, in the close relationships, and even in our bodies is a learnable skill. And that's great. Science is confirming this. We've been told by motivational speakers and gurus that this is the case, but a lot of people are overwhelmed by the culture's general resignation, that whole quicksand conversation. Second, he says, when we develop the skill of mind sight, we actually change the physical structure of the brain, and this is what they've been able to observe. So developing that lens, that mind sight lens, to observe our own processes, to empathize with others, that enables us to see the mind more clearly, stimulates the brain to grow in important new connections. And this he's saying the bottom line of this, and again, this is something that we've been told by the wisdom literature and the gurus and so forth, that how we focus our attention shapes the structure of our brain. And this is a huge message from Robert in this book that I have just completed. A big part of it is saying it is really possible, he talks about that success consciousness. It's really possible to change your way of thinking such that you actually see the world in different ways, and as a result, you actually see opportunity when it comes up, when it shows up. You see it where other people don't see it because they're not tuned for it. And the third insight is that he says well-being emerges when we create connections, meaningful connections in our lives, when we learn to use mindsight to help the brain achieve and maintain integration. And this is connections with other people, but also connections between the parts of our lives and the parts of us and so forth. Anyway, and he says the goal of that integration is to become flexible and free, to avoid the extremes of rigidity and dissipation, to find a way to be both flexible and free. So anyway, I'll probably share more from MindSight with you. This has been a really fascinating study for me. So thanks for listening today. Keep telling your story. I'll look forward to hearing more interaction from you. Bye-bye for now.